some general do's and don'ts. Here, I've made a page with some general do's and don'ts and tips for the oral history process, both before, during, and after the interview. These are all in the handbook, but it might be useful for you to pause the video again here and take some time to think about whether each of these points are do's or don'ts. Before the recording begins, do conduct some general research on the interviewee and their background before starting the interview, so you understand any historical or cultural references made by them. By emailing or, ideally, talking on the phone in advance, you'll start to build up a rapport with your interviewee, which will help massively when the day of the interview arrives. As I've already mentioned, though, don't send them the question schedule in advance. A rough outline is fine, and interviewees will probably already have an idea of some of the things they want to say, but we don't want rehearsed answers. Do accept a drink if offered, even if it's just a water, a cup of tea, whatever. It may sound strange, but it will help to put you both at ease at the start of the interview. During the interview, take some time again to pause the video here and just think about whether each of these points are do's or don'ts. Do expect your interviewee to have an agenda and be patient whilst they say the things they want to say. This usually all comes out at the start of the interview. There are ways you can guide them back towards the topics you want to ask about through your questions, but do acknowledge the points that they have been wanting to make. Keep interruptions or your own input to a minimum. Sticking to one person speaking at a time helps the clarity of the final audio clip. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't encourage the interviewee throughout the interview. Try to show your interest in non-verbal ways, such as nodding, maintaining eye contact, and smiling when appropriate. Do allow long pauses. Sometimes giving the interviewee time to think before jumping straight to the next question can prompt them to think over the questions and say more. If you're someone who likes to fill silences, this can feel awkward and unnatural, but it really is worth it because it gives them more time to think. Do check regularly during the interview that your recording device is still recording. Do listen carefully. The best interviews are made when the interviewer asks pertinent questions based on the interviewee's answers. Don't push your interviewee to answer questions on things they are not comfortable talking about. This is something you could make clear from the beginning, before recording begins. Just make it clear that if there is anything they would rather not talk about, just to say so, and you will move on to a different question. Don't stick rigidly to the question schedule. This should be a prompt rather than a script. Instead, listen to the interviewee and expand on what they say as much as possible. Finally, try to avoid offering your opinion on topics, as this can influence the interviewee's answers if they sense that you don't agree with them. That's not to say that you should robotically agree with everything and keep silent, but just try to remain neutral and not ask leading questions which could influence the interviewee's answer or pressure them into answering a certain way. For example, instead of saying, "You mentioned you lived alone in lockdown. That must have been very lonely at times," you could ask, "How did you find the experience of living alone throughout lockdown?"